A millionaire accused her of stealing his engagement ring. What he said next made her cry. The soft afternoon sun bathed the coastal city of Santa Isla in a golden glow, glimmering off the glass walls of the towering Alvarez & Cosos. From the 30th floor, the entire city looked like a miniature model, perfect and orderly. But the heart of Marco Alvarez, co-owner of the most prestigious architecture firm in the city, was anything but. It had been 3 months since Camila Reyes, the woman he once thought was his everything, walked away from him on what was supposed to be the most sacred night of their lives. He had the ring, booked a seaside restaurant, even practiced kneeling down. But everything shattered for one reason. He was too late. Camila had run out of patience waiting for promises that never came true. Worse, in the chaos that followed, Marco lost the engagement ring, a $1 million diamond that carried not just sparkle, but all the love, hope, and dreams he had poured into their relationship. From that moment on, Marco was no longer the warm, composed man people once admired. He became distant, cold, and irritable, especially whenever someone dared to mention the word marriage. Though his career remained untouchable, his heart, once brave enough to love fiercely, had become a ruin no one dared to approach. And he vowed, "That ring must return to me, no matter the cost." Little did he know, that very vow would lead him into a completely unexpected twist of fate, with a stranger from a world far from his own, a girl from the noisy markets, carrying a past Marco could have never imagined. In a cramped corner of Santa Isla's Central Market, surrounded by the noise of metal carts and the cries of fishmongers, sat a tiny eatery, always cloaked in morning smoke. Locals called it Aunt Liza's Diner, a favorite of laborers and street vendors. And inside its narrow kitchen, Rena Mendoza, 23 years old, moved with swift hands and unwavering eyes. Rena wasn't the kind of girl who broke easily. Life had taught her to be tough. Her mother passed away from illness when she was just 16. A few years later, her father was diagnosed with a psychological disorder and admitted to a long-term care facility. As an only child, Rena had to quit college in her 3rd year, where she had been studying business management at a local university. Since then, she'd learned how to survive. Up before sunrise for the market, cooking lunch for dozens, cleaning at night, and counting coins by the light of a single bulb, just enough to pay her father's hospital bills, the rent, and maybe one day tuition to return to school. The diner wasn't hers. It belonged to Aunt Liza, her late mother's closest friend. Out of kindness, Aunt Liza offered Rena a place to stay and a modest salary. Rena, despite her circumstances, carried herself with pride. She refused to be a burden on anyone. But there was one person who always disrupted her fragile peace: Uncle Ramon. Her mother's younger brother used to be funny and kind, but years of gambling had turned him into a shadow of his former self. He'd show up unannounced, ask for money, promise repayment, and disappear. Just a week ago, he handed her 10,000 pesos. "Use it for your dad's hospital fees," he grinned. "I hit the jackpot this time." Rena didn't trust where the money came from, but with her father's health hanging by a thread, she had no choice. She didn't know then that the money, and Ramon's so-called jackpot, came from a diamond ring he found near a beachfront hotel. A ring that would soon shatter and reshape the quiet life she had built. The doorbell rang at noon, startling Rena so hard she nearly dropped her knife mid-chop. 2 men in dark suits stood outside, a sleek SUV parked behind them. One stepped forward and showed a badge. "Investigative Police, Miss Rena Mendoza?" Her chest tightened. She'd done nothing wrong, yet one name instantly rang in her mind like a warning bell: Ramon. She was escorted to a downtown office building where a man was already waiting. He sat with one leg crossed, holding an espresso cup, his gaze sharp and frigid like a knife through glass. Marco Alvarez. She didn't know the name, but when their eyes met, she sensed something was deeply wrong. Rage, disappointment, and pain, long buried. "The ring," he said bluntly. "Your uncle took it, and now I want it back." Rena was stunned. "I don't know anything about a ring." "You expect me to believe that?" Marco snapped. "You live with him. You must know." She tried to explain, but he cut her off. After a brief conversation with the officers, Marco offered her two options. "Either help me find a way to recover the ring, or stay here temporarily to work off the value in a safe arrangement." Marco stood, voice steady. "It's not a threat, just the only solution I can offer that avoids legal trouble, for now." Rena froze. Not fear, just the weight of a decision she wasn't ready for. To her shock, he produced a preliminary agreement. Temporary stay at his penthouse, 1 month minimum, in exchange for household duties and meal prep. No leaving the premises without permission. A forced cooperative arrangement, as the document coldly put it. Rena felt humiliated, hurt, but she also knew if this reached the hospital, her father's treatment might be cut off. And more than that, she feared being entangled in legal trouble for her uncle's mess. She nodded, slowly but firmly. Marco's penthouse sat high above the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows opening to the ocean. Everything was clean, modern, and as cold as its owner. Rena entered with a single backpack, a few clothes, and her life savings. It felt like walking into a predator's den, where she was prey under constant watch. Marco said little. He pointed to the guest room, then said flatly, "That's your room. Breakfast starts at 6 a.m. "You plan to monitor me that closely?" Rena asked. He glanced at her. "You're living here to pay a debt, so yes, very closely." That night, Rena sat on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the spotless ceiling, her mind reeling. She didn't know what fate awaited her. Only one thing was certain. From the moment she entered that apartment, her life had turned down a path she never saw coming. Rena's first day as a hostage began with a sharp knock on her door at 5:45 a.m. Marco didn't need many words. A firm nod and a stern gaze were enough to get her up, apron on, and following him downstairs to the first floor of the building where Costa Brava was located. Costa Brava had once been one of Santa Isla's finest restaurants, but after Marco's father passed, its energy faded. The head chef had just resigned, only a few staff remained, and the kitchen sat in silence. Marco didn't explain why he brought her there, but when Rena stepped into the kitchen, she understood. "Get in. Cook me the best thing you know," he ordered, his tone as dry as old wood. "I want to see if you're worth keeping." She didn't respond with words. Instead, she calmly rolled up her sleeves, tied her hair back, and opened the fridge. She chose simple ingredients: rice, beef, purple onion, eggs, and a dash of black sauce. In just 20 minutes, the dead silence of the kitchen was replaced with the savory aroma of Korean-style beef fried rice. When Marco took a bite, he paused, just briefly, but enough for Rena to notice. "Better than I expected," he muttered and turned away. From that day, Rena became Costa Brava's temporary chef. At first, the staff looked at her with suspicion. A market girl in a fine restaurant was clearly not welcome. But Rena didn't care. She kept her head down, cooked with focus, cleaned everything spotless, inspected every ingredient, and quietly suggested new dishes. Bit by bit, the skeptical looks, the arrogant whispers, and the sideways glances began to shift. Within just a week, the Costa Brava kitchen was no longer cold and quiet. Under Rena's hands, the space came alive. The hiss of hot oil, the savory smell of simmered broth, stir-fried greens cooked just right, seared meats releasing smoky fragrance. It was as if the kitchen had come back to life. Rena didn't come from any prestigious culinary school. Her cooking came from a small stove in a poorer time. While checking her father's medication, she learned how to cook with limited ingredients, how to substitute improvise, and most importantly, how to cook with heart. She proposed a new side menu: light Asian comfort dishes, Korean seaweed soup, Japanese curry rice, Vietnamese spring rolls. At first, Marco rejected it. This is a European kitchen, not a sidewalk eatery. But when the head chef was absent one afternoon, Rena took a chance and served chicken teriyaki rice for lunch. Diners loved it. Some returned the next day just to order that same dish. From one item, Marco allowed her a second, then a third. Revenue began to climb. Former guests returned. New customers came looking for fresh, different, but comforting flavors. Online, Costa Brava slowly gained positive reviews after nearly a year in silence. Marco noticed. Though his expression stayed stern, Rena could tell. His eyes lingered a little longer on her dishes. One evening, he walked into the kitchen while she was testing a Vietnamese tamarind soup. He stood silently, watching her taste and stir. He didn't speak, but he didn't walk away either. The shift was subtle. Marco still snapped at delays, still criticized if a dish wasn't perfect. But his tone softened. He stopped calling her troublemaker and began using her name, Rena. One rainy night, after a long shift, Rena stepped outside with no umbrella. Rain came down hard. Marco saw her standing quietly beneath the awning, shivering in her thin shirt. Without a word, he handed her his coat. "Don't stay so late. Sea storms come quick," he said, voice low and brief. It was the first time he cared, not for food, not for business, not for debt, but for her. For Rena Mendoza, not a hostage, but a person. Later that month, Marco received an invitation to a high-end architecture and design summit in Cebu. It was a prestigious event, drawing elites from the hotel, restaurant, and real estate industries. Costa Brava was in charge of the buffet, but the head chef had just taken emergency leave. Marco didn't think twice. He turned to Rena. "Come with me." "What?" She blinked. "I'm not the head chef." "But you're the only one who cooks dishes people return for." That sentence, the first compliment he had ever given her, left Rena stunned. She didn't know whether to accept or refuse. But deep down, she knew this was a chance, not just to prove herself, but to escape the tension of the apartment they shared. Cebu welcomed them with golden sunshine and salty ocean air. Their hotel was a luxurious five-star resort with a private beach and elegant restaurants. Rena had never been anywhere like it. She felt clumsy in the uniform dress they gave her, awkward in the grand hallways, but she held her poise with quiet dignity. That evening was the pre-event tasting. Rena managed the hot station. She cooked spicy beef in chili sauce and stir-fried seafood udon. Guests loved it. A few even asked for the recipe. Marco watched her from a distance, her face glistening under warm lights, focused, yet smiling. He had never seen her look so beautiful. After cleanup, they headed back to the hotel. The elevator was packed, so they walked up the stairs. For several floors, only the sound of her heels and the ocean breeze filled the space. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. That night, Rena couldn't sleep. The soft sheets, the elegant decor, it all felt too much. Marco sat outside on the balcony, glass of wine in hand, staring into the dark sea as if searching for something. Without knowing why, Rena stepped out. "Can't sleep?" she asked gently. He didn't look back. "I rarely do in unfamiliar places." Minutes passed in silence. Then he spoke again, voice lower. "I used to think, if I had proposed on time, everything might have been different." "You loved her that much?" Rena asked, not sure if it was curiosity or the ache rising in her chest. Marco looked at her. "I don't know anymore. Maybe I did, but now I just know I don't want to lose anything else." Their eyes locked, and in that endless second, something shifted. Then it happened, not planned, not spoken. The gap between them closed. Sea breeze swept around them, salt and breath tangled. Marco leaned in, kissed her. Their first kiss, neither soft nor tentative, but charged with all the emotion they had buried. Rena melted into it, not because it was sudden, but because she could feel the loneliness inside him. They had waited too long, unspoken feelings, avoided gazes, quiet acts of care. That night, they didn't return to separate beds. They didn't speak after. But one thing was certain, nothing between them would ever be the same. 1 month after that rainy night in Cebu, life between Marco and Rena had shifted. Strangely, they still lived in the same apartment, but now no longer as host and hostage. No one spoke of that night as if it had been a drunken mistake. But Marco's eyes, whenever they landed on Rena, had changed. Softer, quieter, like he was trying to hide something, vulnerable. Rena avoided him, not because she regretted what happened, but because she was afraid. Afraid she had let herself fall too far. Afraid that night meant everything to her, and perhaps nothing to him. And then, late, one day, then another, then 3 weeks. Rena bought a pregnancy test in silence. When the second line appeared, bold and unmistakable, her chest collapsed in on itself. She sank to the bathroom floor, arms around her stomach, tears falling without sound. What now? She was still trying to return to college. Her father was still in the hospital. She had no family nearby, no one to lean on. Marco, what would he think? What would he say? That night, she packed her things quietly. Not much, a few clothes, some money, and her ID. She left the apartment key and a small note on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for everything. I'm sorry." But just as she opened the door, his voice came from behind. "Where do you think you're going?" Rena froze. Marco leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets, his gaze dark. I need time to think. He walked forward, stopping just in front of her. "I know." She looked up, stunned. "You know what?" Marco pulled a used pregnancy test from his pocket. "I found it in the trash." He sighed, voice lower now. "At first I panicked too, but then I realized, this isn't just your problem, and I don't want you to go." Rena bit her lip. Tears rolled down again. "You don't have to do this just out of obligation." "No," Marco cut her off. "I'm not asking you to stay because I feel responsible. I'm asking because I want you here." For the first time, he stepped closer, not cold, not commanding. Just Marco, a man trying to say something real. "You're not alone in this. I'm here, until the day you don't want me anymore." Rena nodded through tears. No words could fully capture the wave of relief and emotion crashing inside her. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to be strong by herself. They didn't put a name to what they were, nor did they rush into promises. But from that moment on, something invisible tied Marco and Rena together, not just responsibility, but a feeling that was slowly, quietly growing between them. It seemed like things were finally falling into place. But life rarely lets peace last for too long. 3 months after the Cebu trip, Rena was adjusting to her new rhythm. Nearly 10 weeks into her pregnancy, she still worked at Costa Brava, but Marco had eased her schedule. She was no longer just the girl repaying a debt. She had become part of his life, quietly, without promises, but with presence. It seemed like everything was finally settling down, until the storm came. That day, Marco received an international call. When he returned to the apartment, a woman was already seated in the living room, golden waves in her hair, a trench coat over her designer dress, the soft scent of French perfume filling the air. Camilla Reyes. After nearly 6 months in France for a modeling contract, she had come back. No warning, no message. "I missed you," she said, eyes full of longing. "I made a mistake leaving without giving you the chance to explain." Marco stood still. "You didn't make a mistake. You just chose what was right for you." "No," Camilla stepped closer. "There's still so much left between us. I'll walk away from everything, if you're willing to start again." Rena heard everything from the kitchen. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. The door was open, and Camilla's words echoed clearly. Her heart sank. She quietly returned to her room, cradling her stomach, where the tiny life inside her grew each day. Part of her wanted to believe in Marco, but their past? It was too perfect, too polished. And her? A market girl carrying an unplanned child? That evening, Rena avoided Marco. She skipped dinner, claimed she was tired. Marco said nothing, but he knew she had heard. The next morning, he knocked on her door. Rena opened it, pale and quiet. "Rena, please listen," Marco said, his voice calm and steady. "Camilla coming back doesn't change anything. She's my past. You're my present and future." "Are you sure?" she asked, forcing herself to stay composed. "Are you really not tempted, not even for a moment?" Marco stepped forward, placing a hand gently on her stomach. "Because of you and our baby, I've never been more certain of anything." After hearing those words from Marco, Rena couldn't hold back her tears. Not because she was weak, but because for the first time in her life, she felt chosen, not out of obligation, not out of pity, but for who she truly was. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to hide her past or pretend to belong. She was loved as she was. She once believed love was reserved for girls like Camilla, beautiful, educated, from polished families. But here she was, a market girl, hands rough from work, sometimes clumsy, sometimes stubborn, and she was the one he chose to stay with. She and the unborn child they now shared. Marco's hand on her belly wasn't just a gesture. It was a quiet promise, unspoken but solid. And in that moment, Rena knew. She had found home. That afternoon, a man appeared at Costa Brava. Uncle Ramon, thinner, grayer, eyes heavy with guilt. He placed an envelope on the counter. "I'm sorry, Rena. This is all I have. I can't repay it all, but I don't want you to carry my mistakes forever." Rena froze. All the anger she once held faded when she saw the remorse in his eyes. Marco stood nearby, silent. He took the envelope and gave a simple nod. "The money's not what matters. Owning up, that's what counts." That night, as they walked home, Marco turned to Rena and said, "You don't have to leave, not ever again." Rena didn't reply. She rested her head on his shoulder, tears falling quietly. The storm had passed, and for the first time she believed. This time she was staying. Marco didn't stop at words. He did something Rena never dared to imagine. He made their relationship public. Shortly after Camilla's return, Marco brought Rena to his family's seaside villa, a quiet, elegant home perched on a hill overlooking the ocean, where his mother, Teresa Alvarez, had lived alone since her husband's passing. The garden bloomed with lavender, and the waves could be heard from every corner of the house. "This will be our home," Marco said, taking her hand, "if my mother agrees." Teresa was known for being strict, graceful, and a bit distant, but when she saw Rena's honest eyes and the small roundness beneath her cotton dress, she simply said, "You've made my son smile again. That's enough." From then on, a new chapter began. Rena returned to university to finish her business management degree. Though her belly grew heavier each week, she attended classes regularly, supported by Marco, who quietly waited in the car for hours just to take her home safely. She no longer feared stares or judgment, no longer walked with her head down. She wasn't just a mother-to-be. She was a woman reclaiming her dream, her dignity, and her place in the world. That June, on a quiet morning of soft rain, Rena gave birth to a healthy baby boy at Santa Isla International Hospital. Marco was the first to hold him. He looked at the tiny, wrinkled, sleeping child and whispered, "Hello, Liam." The name, Liam, wasn't one they had planned. It came suddenly, like instinct. Gentle, peaceful. A sign of the quiet rebirth this little boy brought to two people who had once been broken. Teresa visited that same afternoon. She held Liam with trembling hands, then turned to Rena. "Thank you. This child is the miracle our family has waited for." Rena smiled, tears rolling silently. No more distance, no more divide between past and present. In that moment, she knew. She had truly been accepted. Life was no longer a battle to survive. Now, each morning began with the sound of waves crashing on the shore, the scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen where Marco prepared breakfast, and the joyful giggles of Liam echoing through the white villa. She didn't have everything, but she had what mattered most: a home, a man who loved her with his whole heart, and a child, a living symbol of forgiveness, faith, and a brand new beginning. From the ruins, she had been loved. And from a story that began with a lost diamond ring, Rena had found a whole new life. Marco stopped hiding. No more hesitation, no more holding back. He publicly acknowledged his relationship with Rena, to friends, colleagues, and even those who once doubted her. Everyone now knew the woman Marco Alvarez loved was Rena Mendoza, the girl who had entered his life unexpectedly and turned it upside down. He brought her to live at the seaside villa, where his mother, Teresa Alvarez, had lived alone for nearly 10 years since her husband's passing. The white villa stood quietly on a hill, facing the ocean, surrounded by soft winds and blooming lavender. Teresa wasn't known for being warm, but she was perceptive. Upon meeting Rena for the first time, she looked at her for a moment, then simply said, "You don't have to try so hard. That boy smiles because of you. That's enough." Rena's life slowly found its rhythm. Marco encouraged her to return to university and finish her business management degree. He said, "No strong woman should ever give up her dreams just because she becomes a mother." And so she returned to the lecture hall, 7 months pregnant, walking slower, tiring more easily, but with eyes that shone brighter than ever before. Marco picked her up every day, waiting patiently outside, rain or shine. She no longer felt like an extra in someone else's story. For the first time, she felt wanted, needed, and loved. One late autumn afternoon, as the sun softened over the villa's porch, Marco led Rena to the lavender garden behind the house. The scent drifted gently in the wind, and the light turned everything gold. "Close your eyes," he said. "I have something to say, or rather, to finish." Rena hesitated but obeyed. When she opened her eyes, Marco was holding a small velvet box. Not the diamond ring from the past, but another ring, older, simpler, timeless. A sapphire gleamed in the soft light. "I bought back the old ring," Marco began, "but not to keep it." He paused. His voice was steady, but carried a quiet release. "I auctioned it, donated every dollar to a charity for single mothers and underprivileged children here in Santa Isla. I figured, if everything began with a ring, it should end with something better." Rena stared at him, speechless. She hadn't expected this way of closing the past. Marco opened the velvet box. "This ring," he said softly, "belonged to my grandmother. It's been passed through 3 generations. My mother kept it for the woman I would truly love and honor." He knelt down in the golden sunlight. "Rena Mendoza, will you marry me?" No applause, no lights, just the hush of wind and the beating of her heart. In that moment, Rena felt every scar, every tear, every sleepless night collapse into this one fragile, beautiful question. She couldn't speak. She nodded, once then again, until her knees gave out and the tears came, not just from joy, but from release. In June, Rena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. He had Marco's eyes and her warm, sun-kissed skin. Marco named him Liam, a name that meant strong protector. Liam became the center of every smile in that villa. Teresa adored him. Marco learned how to change diapers, rock him to sleep, and even sing lullabies in his low, slightly off-key voice, making Rena laugh every time. As for Rena, she didn't need anything more. She had once walked through loss and silence, once thought she wasn't meant for joy. But now, in that house by the sea, beside the man who once seemed so distant, holding the baby who was both miracle and promise, she knew she had found the most precious thing of all, a real family. 1 year after their wedding, with Liam just learning to walk, the seaside villa in Santa Isla echoed with the sound of his laughter each morning. Teresa had added new frames to the living room, family photos of the three of them, pictures of Rena holding Liam on the shore, and Marco playing in the waves with their son. Love no longer felt like some grand event. It lived in the little things. A dish towel hung by the window, the clumsy Friday dinners Marco insisted on cooking, or the quiet moments Rena got up at midnight to check if their baby was still warm under the blanket. That evening, after putting Liam to bed, Marco and Rena sat on the wooden swing facing the sea. Moonlight painted silver across the waves, and the wind hummed low, almost like a lullaby. "Do you ever think," Marco began softly, "that if I hadn't lost that ring, everything might have turned out differently?" Rena turned to look at him. "I was going to propose to Camilla with it, but if I hadn't lost it, I never would have met you, never would have kidnapped you, even though that still sounds insane." He chuckled. "And I wouldn't have all of this." He glanced back toward the house, where Liam's nightlight still glowed through the window. "You know, Rena, I used to think happiness came from choosing the right person. But now I realize it's about letting go at the right time and believing in something unexpected." Rena was silent for a moment. Then she turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "Me too. I used to think that if I ever got too tired, too worn out, I'd just disappear quietly. No one needed me anyway. But then you showed up in the most ridiculous, frustrating way possible, and somehow became the light at the end of my tunnel." She squeezed his hand. "And then Liam was born. I'm not scared anymore. I don't feel so small in this world. You and our son are the best things life has ever given me." Marco tightened his grip around her hand. "Thank you for not walking away, even after everything." Rena smiled. "Because you also chose to stay, truly stay." That moment didn't need music or fireworks. Just two people, once broken, now whole. Two hearts that had chosen to love, to forgive, to try again, despite every misstep along the way. Because real love doesn't come from perfection. It comes from patience when the other is still healing, from sacrifice when neither has anything yet to give, from a lost ring, a misunderstanding that once felt like a disaster, but became a miracle instead. And Rena, the girl who once only wanted enough money for her father's medicine, now sat in the arms of the man who loved her, with their son fast asleep behind the door. She smiled and thought, maybe life really does give us beautiful gifts, even if they come late or from the most unexpected places. From a lost ring came a home. From a mistake came redemption. From pain came the most honest love she had ever known.